All right. Well, happy International Coaching Week. I'm Jennifer Britton. I'm here with Ivana Valet, our team lead for group coaching. And we're going to talk today about 5 ways to engage in group and team coaching. I have to say, this is probably one of the main questions we get. How does team and group coaching differ from a workshop, differ from uh, facilitation? And this is probably one of those areas. So what I wanted to share today are 5 different ways we can be looking at seeding directly and indirectly in calls engagement strategies. So what would you say, Ivana, is important when you think about the word engagement? What is important from your perspective as a group coach?
Even before getting on this call, I was actually thinking how this conversation starts before you get them into the room,
Yes.
in terms of making sure that the right people are actually in your conversation so they are ready to engage,
Yeah.
right? There's a
And
technology layer, but there's also a market. Like there's so many layers to engage is what is coming to me in the coaching many or group coaching conversation.
I love that. And here's a quick definition of engage, right? And this actually comes from today's morning inquiry that I do on TikTok regularly. So I went and looked up, what does it mean? Oxford Languages calls engage occupy, attract, or involve someone's interest or attention, or to participate or become involved in. And as Ivana said, there's an on-ramp, right? So what are you doing to engage with your group and team coaching program? People. And that means how are we co-creating, which actually starts before we get on the call. Earlier today, I was presenting to an ICF chapter, and we talked about the importance of those pre-call one-on-ones. Who are you? What's brought you here? And what do you want out of the coaching process? So as Ivana said, we've got to start before. So even with that in mind, we want to leverage the Nomad. This is some of my latest writing. You will see this coming out in late 2024, early 2025. But as you can see, principle-based group coaching has everything that is all about engagement. It's client-centered. It's about partnership and co-creation. We have a start and an end. We are leveraging the power of peer process. We are making sure that we're holding our clients creative, resourceful, and whole. And in our work, we want to make sure that we are thinking about how are we engaging people on that 360 view? Are we focusing on doing and or being, action and or awareness? So really that's a whole 360 frame. And just like anything in coaching, right, it's about being unattached. We don't know where people will go, but if we ask the question before we step in a room, it's going to go its own way. So don't fight the current. Many of you have heard me speak for years on best practices, so I'm not going to go into this today other than this is what is embedded in from one to many. And notice so many of these are about activating your clients, knowing your client, thinking about what happens in between calls, meeting with them. So it's not a one-off, it's an ongoing process. And this is where we want to make sure that we are also anchoring our work in different areas. So again, some of my latest writing that many of you might have heard me speak about, some of you may never have seen this yet. So this is really the compass. And in terms of that 360 view, we want to make sure that we are focusing on all areas at some point during the ongoing conversation. If we just focus on one of these sort of degrees, we're not providing a full picture to our clients. So are we working goals and vision or baseline values and principles? Are we taking people into that action and growth and or focusing on awareness and insight? And that leads us, of course, to this midpoint. Where are we providing pause for integration, connection, and I would even assert application. So all of this is key because group and team coaching is not a passive strategy. It is not about seeing the slide. It's actually about breaking each of these down, and a different touch point, a different call might actually have a different focus. So what you see on the compass, which again, you'll see more in our upcoming 90 days and 90 ways to coach groups and teams, you will see this really broken down into 90 different ways that you could be coaching groups and teams. So that is engagement one. Now, engagement two, Ivana sort of talked about it. It's about using the technology. And if you were with us over the last 4 years, you were probably in the sort of ecosystem of Standout Virtually, Virtual Facilitation Essentials. This is something I introduced back in 2020 to get facilitators, coaches, really thinking about how do we activate people, even if they're not talking. How do we activate people in the virtual space? So are we using chat? Are we getting people to use the back chat? And for larger calls, you might have a back chat going, i.e. people sharing their experience with each other. The wow, of course, is our ways of working. How are we framing what this call is for and how much engagement there is? Is this a passive? Is it a reflective? Is it a verbal? Is it a write it down? Part of framing engagement is about boosting engagement through chat as well as these other tools. So you've probably read through them, but you might be using polls, annotation, whiteboard, breakouts. And Ivana, with all your experience, what are your favorites? I know for me, I love annotation. I use it all the time. What is your favorite engagement in a smaller group? Let's frame it like smaller and then bigger group. So what do you like to use?
Yeah, I think in smaller group, and when I think smaller group, I'm thinking like 4 to 6, like that's really that number, 4 or 5, 6. I think because I'm a kinesthetic person, and also it just brings a level of engagement with good, I'm going to say with some facilitation support of guiding your participants in a virtual conversation on how to use annotate. But I like the annotate for sure. And even the whiteboard, because in a smaller group, there's less likely of tricky issues with people writing over one another. You can kind of, again, facilitate, pick a corner, put your mark, and it really does help people learn on different layers, doing it,
Yeah.
reading it, and then talking about it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key strategies to engagement, right? Coaching generally is very verbal, but not all of us think in that verbal patterning first. So, like Ivana said, how are we using a whiteboard to first get people to pause, think about it, then communicate, not verbally, but written, and then eventually communicate verbally if we call on them. So again, it's the layers of learning that for those that are a Spiral Lighthouse coach, you will love that strategy. No right way, but think about what you're using and what you're not using. Because I think even in 2024, I'm still surprised that people really don't know how to use annotation or don't activate it. This group that I was working with earlier today, 25 people maybe on the call, we use 3 rounds of annotation. And so, one of the takeaway for the end of the call, we just had an hour together, was I really like the fact that you asked us to participate in different ways. Speaks to engagement. So just to recap, number 1 is think about where you are on the compass and how you're activating these. Again, the compass is going to show up in my writing later this year. 2, how are you activating engagement levers? And 3, what about those different layers of connection? So some of you
And
may be familiar with this. Yeah,
if
Ivana?
I may, we talked about small groups and larger groups, but we never
Oh, yeah.
circled back. So just
Yeah.
in honor of the setting up the context, do you want to start and then I can share?
Yeah, so I would say large group, I would use annotation, breakouts possibly, followed by chat. I think those would be my 3. Polls I have here, but I don't, I think polls are interesting more in training than group coaching. So that would be
Yeah.
my comment for today, very off the cuff. What about you? What do you think for large groups?
I'm in total alignment with you, because it also brings a balance of personalities, thinking about who are the people in your group, and also that chameleon that we talk about, like how can I stretch time versus contract time? And so these resources, depending on the situation, you can pull on, both based on who's in the conversation with you, the size of the group, but also what's going to move the conversation forward.
And
Absolutely.
and yeah, I
And
was
I
going to
was
say
gonna
I
say,
like that with the chat, right? Like chat condenses. We can get everyone's voice on the line in 1 minute versus hearing from everyone, which might be 25 minutes.
yeah.
So Back to you.
Yeah. I was just gonna say polls for me is something I might use in a marketing engagement conversation coming into the virtual group coaching conversation, just to get a pulse of what's in the landscape. But I don't tend to lean to polls in the group coaching conversation at all.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting discernment, right? It's like marketing and or training versus coaching. Coaching still very verbal as a modality. So, well, thank you for the reminder to bring us back, bring us back to that, because we're always working on these different layers, right? And so this showed up in, it's a framework from Reconnecting Workspaces. You'll see it as one of the many frameworks in the 21 chapters. And what I wanted to get at here, which a lot of coaches like, is the fact that we're having and seeding and designing engagement at all levels. One, how do people engage with a topic? And that's as simple as asking, what's your connection with today's theme or topic we're exploring? Two, people want to be connected with you as a coach. So hopefully you're doing those pre-calls we already referenced. Maybe you are seeding or including one-on-ones throughout a group coaching process. Third layer, many coaches don't activate, is connecting with other peers. So is there peer-to-peer work in between group touch points? That could be formal, it could be informal. The challenge with informal, though, is do people do it? And then they come to the call and they're like, oh, I'm part of a group right now, and it was very, very informal. No one's done it in the first 3 weeks. Because again, I don't think, one, there was enough direction, or two, there was enough focus on why would we have a peer connection or conversation. So if you're using these, we want to really insert that intentionality. And I would say for Tuesday, May 14th, intentionality is my word of the day, because I've been embracing it about 4 times, and no surprise, in a box back here, I have my little Wayne Dwyer Power of Intention book that just fell out of a bookshelf this weekend when I was home. So that's interesting. Third area, content, right? How are we connecting people to content? And this is where choice point. Is content part of the group coaching process? Like, is it micro learning that you might view, engage with before you get on the call? And micro learning could be listen to this TED talk, watch this 2-minute video, listen to this audio, engage in this self-assessment. That's all content, which is going to springboard into the conversation. That's a little different than a platform. And so many of you have platform preferences. Again, we go low tech in group coaching. It's not about creating an online course. Let's get that really clear, because the center point is not that learning module. The center point as group coaches is the conversation. And so different coaches do different things depending on their clients, whether it's a Dropbox, whether it's by email, whether it's a LMS, learning management system platform. You've got Kajabi, you've got Teachable, you've got a whole slew of them. But you'll want to think about what is important about connecting people with platform, and how does platform get in the way of conversation. And that's why we here at Potentials Realize keep it lean and basic, right? It's like you get an email, possibly you get a Dropbox link, but really it's like we want to have you in the conversation first and then deal with any other supports. So what do you think about that? Anything you want to say on platform, Ivana? Because I know you and I have had a lot of dialogue around this over time.
Yeah, I what's coming to me is you always have to be thinking about what is going to be easy for your participants, and this is part of the co-creation. We do this even in group coaching essentials, right? Is involving your participants. So the easier we can make it, the more likely they're going to actually be receptive and be part of it. So there isn't a one-stop solution. It's really knowing who your people are, how tech savvy they are, but also what is the impact you're trying to create when choosing the platform.
And that is, obviously in group coaching, it's conversation first. We're not about bells and whistles, asynchronous. Group coaching is a synchronous, live, intimate conversation space. So the most important platform is your Zoom or possibly Teams. But as I always like to say, Teams, it does not have the same interface. Also, if you're on Teams and you record, it's going into the stream of an organization. That is a ethical no-no in terms of it going into an organizational space. It doesn't look and feel the same. And so that can impact your trust, safety, and connection. That's the foundation of this work. So again, 6 layers might seem like a lot, but every call you want to think through these. And the final one that we haven't talked about is the open window, which is the context. What is the bridge between what you're doing in group coaching, physically or virtually, to everyday life? And that's what coaching is. It's a bridge between thinking and doing. It's a bridge between being and becoming. So what is the context frame? And that to me is, you know, the golden ticket, because even with this team, I just, you know, won a tendering process. And what was the tender win? It was because I was doing the bridge between what are you learning today about change and what are you going to put into practice as a leader? So that's the heart of coaching. It's the only thing that brought me to coaching, to be honest, 22 years ago, because training can do the rest, but coaching is about making the bridge.
I love that. I love that. Can I add something of what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. Yeah, please do.
I'm just thinking in terms of even in our one-on-one training, because I train with CTI and I know you did too, is that whole, what I heard when what you're saying is like that little A versus the big A, like that agenda, the small A agenda. So this topic, but what is it actually bigger than what we're talking about as it relates to you as a leader, you in your life, you and what you and your vision, and how that all comes together. So people really can connect to it. That's why it's like a connection point as it relates to them and their journey.
Yeah, because again, we want to intentionally seed that learning moment, right? Engagement is all about learning. How do you elongate the learning? And while you might not ask a specific question of each of these layers in a conversation, through the way you structure the conversation, like your pre-work or post-work is your link to the context. It's taking people out of this virtual circle or physical circle and helping them apply it individually. The platform, right? Like, the question is, as a designer, am I using the bells and whistles, all the bells and whistles? Am I mixing it up? Because the other piece here is our different styles. So many of you are familiar maybe with my TED Talk, Coaching Teams Through Chaos. What is important about it is not just, if you're working with a team, we want to make sure the team has all of these 6 elements in place, but we want to engage with the team in a way that meets their unique style. So each of these colors has a hybrid work style associated. Are you a visionary? If I'm working with a visionary, I'm using language that is visual. What does it look like? Where are you going? What next? That's a very different language than perhaps the person who is next to them. If you go back in the circle from 1 to 6, the shared commitment advocate is the connector. The connector is all about the heart. They're all about the emotion. They're all about the bridge. They're about not thinking about where we're going, but what is the connection point between these things? So the hybrid work styles for some of you is something that you've learned about with us. You've taken the 14 CCE hour hybrid work styles quiz course. You can actually use the quiz with your clients if you take that program with us, and it becomes a whole other level of engagement, because in any team, you're going to have a mix of all these different styles, all these different advocates on a team. And where teams learn to excel is by being, again, intentional. Who is our advocate for this vision? How are they going to keep that alive versus the person beside them, the builder who wants to get things done? As a team, we want to have all of these things at play. And so it's another engagement level, number 4. Anything you want to say on this, Ivana?
I'm just reflecting in terms of our own team and how the dynamics of our team and how they relate to that. Because I'm the builder and I do want to get things done. So I often am the one who moves things forward or systematizes things. And it's also the conversation that I'm thinking about as it relates to even strengths. I know you haven't talked about it, but like,
Yet.
yeah, yet it is always part of the conversation, but how that relates to, having results and developing relationships to have those results, is
Yes.
leveraging those strengths, and how we do that as best as we can and effectively at Potentials Realized.
Yeah. And you're speaking to the roles, right? So like if you are on a team, who is best suited for which role?
Yeah.
And is it your work style and or your strength? Because really it's like a W, they go hand in hand. I have strengths, but I also have a preference in my work style. So they might marry, but Ivana says builder. I'm also a builder, but we have different strengths. So our builder and getting things done looks differently. She's systematic. I am not. I am the creative strategic, which is very different. So again, they all are engagement factors though. And are you considering it? Are teams even aware of styles versus strengths? And while they might not do it in tandem, right? When we're working with teams, especially, we want to come back, we want to circle back. They're always, we want to check back. Are you using this? Okay, we've got it. Okay, now next, what is the next layer? And so 6 factors is not just the factors. There's really 3 layers to this. It's the 6 elements that teams need. It's the question they need to be asking, and it's the advocate, the blend of the people on the team. So that's engagement 4. And that links in, if you think about this is a sweet spot. We've just talked about our client styles. We've thought a little bit about the context because automatically our clients come with context. But of course, engagement 5 is strengths. It could be like a Clifton strengths. It could be a VIA strengths, but we specialize in your coaching strengths. So this links to, of course, the Team and Group Coaching Superpower Quiz, which has now been taken by thousands of coaches based on our work, my work over the last 2 decades with tens of thousands of coaches. And what I found is that there really are these 5 archetypes of coaches. Now, here's the thing. Unlike you being static in one archetype, we actually want to foster skill development across all 5 categories, because in a group or a team, you're going to be working, if you're working with a team, you're probably going to have all 10 of these work styles. Now, some of them are the digital dozen, so you've met them, like Sujit. He's on our second row, second in. Sujit is a project manager of the digital dozen. Now, Sujit, being a project manager, he likes to get stuff done. He's a builder by work style, but, and that's a but, he is an ecosystem connector as a coach. He really, part because he's a project manager, he really is good at seeing the whole system. He's good at helping other people see the system, see the connection points, see the advocates, see the people who can help you out in making a project go from A to B. Above him in the C fire, that is Matt, and Matt is a planner. No surprise. And he really is about activation. How do I get things started and then step away? Because that's what planners do. And besides Suji, we've got Marva as well. She's a creative, and she also likes to catalyze people, get them into action. I'm actually, besides Sujit, I put myself in here with the gray hair, and I'm the catalytic firecracker, right? So, sorry, I'm the creative tool master. I get out my little palette and say, oh, I think this team could use a little bit of this with a little bit of that. Let's mix it together and create something new. So again, with superpowers, we may have dominant strengths, and superpowers are not the same as strengths. Superpowers are really blending all of these elements together so that we can meet the diverse needs of the work styles. And here's what we found in the first 2,000 people who had taken the quiz. So while this may not be representative of the 60,000 credentialed coaches in the world, 31% of respondents were Spiral Lighthouse coaches. I think that's interesting. Lots of layers, as we see in this call. Followed by Ecosystem Connector, 23.3%. Followed by Catalytic Firecrackers, the ones that want to catalyze and create by combustion, 19.7%. Followed by Creative Tool Master, only 18.3% as a primary. And then at the end, which I think is an interesting one, I'll say why in a minute. Grounded Labyrinth, the coach who is about helping people be here now, 6.8%. Now, what do we need, or what do our clients need in today's context? Probably a lot more of the Grounded Labyrinth energy. So whether people see that in a response as more as a secondary tertiary, or there's just a smaller sample size, it is the lowest, but I think it is the one that we need to cultivate the most. So Ivana, you get to work training coaches all the time. What do you, when you see these figures, what does it make you think?
It's fairly representative because often we will ask part of the field work, we invite people to do the quiz and then share their outcome, and it's fairly representative. I know this was in the early at 2000 mark, but it's pretty representative of the people that we see coming through our programs. Yeah, I don't often hear it's kind of like the exception that I hear a Grounded Labyrinth come through, which is interesting because my strength is probably my strongest superpower is Spiral Lighthouse, but my secondary is Grounded Labyrinth. But that's also been, what is interesting, and we learned this in the program, is that, as you've already said, is the spectrum that we need to be able to pull on all of these and bring all of these in. But it's actually been my biggest growth as a coach. And it's also been something that I'm really leveraging in group coaching and the coaching many conversation, because as you said, there's a need for this. People are in the hamster wheel and they need a space, a container to pause, to be with what's so.
Yeah. And that is, the whole notion here. We need to be all of this to really attain that mastery, to keep on growing, because mastery is not just about digging one way. It's about expansion so that you can meet the diverse styles for a changing environment, context, and ecosystem that we're operating within. So that is number 5 of the 5. And while I know there are more layers, really just wanted to take you through these 5. So working backwards, we're going to go with number 5 is our superpowers. Number 4, if you're working with teams, think about the 6 factors and how those play out. Again, multiple layers here, including hybrid work styles or just work styles, because the work styles show up in an in-person environment as well. Number 3, 6 layers of connection. And what are you doing to facilitate that? Sort of break it down, integrate it in your design. 5 engagement levers if you are working virtually. And if you are not, then it's similar though, right? Like we might not do polls, but we can do annotation, post-it notes. We can do breakouts. We can do not really a chat, but you might do different facilitated processes where you have other conversations happening. And whiteboard, again, is sort of, let's go back to post-it notes. Let's use whiteboards literally in the room and easels to design and sketch things out. And then our final one is really thinking about this compass notion. And are we integrating all of these elements? Are we getting people into action, providing space for reflection, looking at values and principles, as well as the vision and goals? So that is what I have today. What is your takeaway from this, Ivana?
It just validates the, I'm going to say, the responsibility I have as a coach to continue evolving and growing in terms of that broader need. You know, we come as a starting point, but and it's in the competencies, right? Is our own development and growth so we can be of service to our diverse, client base, whatever that looks like to whoever we serve and support.
Yeah. One slide I didn't bring in today is that coach mastery slide that I've been talking a lot about this year in 2024, because just like Ivana said, there's layers to this, but there's layers that you're going to see a year from now, 10 years from now, right? Coaching evolution is not just let's talk about what I'm doing for the next quarter, right? It's like, what are you doing for the next generation of the next generation? While there are changes on the horizon that will continue to disrupt this profession, at the end of the day, this is the most human side that can't be replaced. And that's what the research is showing. Courses can be designed without us, but we can't be replaced in the conversation. So I think that's a final piece that I want to leave us with as we think about engagement. And why I chose engage is because that's this year's ICW theme, International Coaching Week. So with that, whether you have been with us live for programming in the past or going to join us down the road for some of our ICF CCE programming, or you're an alumni and catching up on this, thank you. Please comment on our video today. Please like it, share it. I think this is really part of the hub of what we've become known for over the last 2 decades and where we continue to serve. We are that one-stop shop for all things coaching money, group coaching, team coaching, leader as coach, peer coaching, because in a world of change, coaching is more important now more than ever. And with that, Ivana, any final words before we wrap up?
Thank you. I continue to be in awe of your ever evolving IP. And you know, some of this is new to me, and I'm looking forward to the book and continuing to grow and learn and support as a coach. Yeah.
Because we all keep on learning and growing. So I'm glad it's resonated. You will see all of this coming up in some of the next books, but it's stuff that we've been doing, right? It's just putting it now in a framework where we can be more intentional and saying, here's how it's connected. How does it all work together? So with that, be well, and we'll see you for our next call in 2 weeks. Take care. Bye.
Bye.